2 deals. 1 night. $250 million. When the Dodgers move, they move. But even by Los Angeles standards, even for a franchise that has redefined what aggressive roster building looks like in the modern era, what happened in the last 24 hours was something different. Something larger. Something that will be talked about not just through the end of this season but for years after it. The GM didn't brief the media in advance. He didn't plant stories with trusted reporters to soften the landing. He executed both deals simultaneously, announced them together, and let the numbers speak for themselves. $250 million. 2 roster additions. 1 trade. 1 contract. And somewhere underneath all of it, as always, as inevitably as gravity, the quiet fingerprints of a franchise that knows exactly where it is going and refuses to wait for anyone else to catch up. To understand why this happened now, you have to understand what the Dodgers front office has been watching since the first week of May. Tucker's situation had been developing slowly. Then all at once. The word emergency first appeared in an internal conversation that was never meant to become public. It described not a single event but an accumulation, a series of small signals that, taken individually, could each be explained away, but taken together pointed clearly toward a problem that was not going to resolve itself with rest and time. Tucker had been managing something. The coaching staff knew it. The training staff knew it. Roberts knew it. And the GM, who misses very little, knew it most clearly of all, because he had been watching the numbers behind the numbers. Not the statistics that appear in box scores. The ones that only appear in private reports. When those reports landed on his desk 3 days ago, he made 2 phone calls before noon, 1 for 1. Clean. Direct. The kind of deal that only happens when both sides have already done the hard work of valuing what they're sending and what they're receiving, when the negotiation is essentially over before it officially begins. The Red Sox pitcher came to Los Angeles on a package that required the Dodgers to send 1 piece in return. The identity of that piece, and the full financial structure of what Boston received, remained partially undisclosed at the time of the announcement. But what was disclosed was enough to understand the shape of the deal. The Red Sox pitcher, a name that had been attached to trade speculation since February, a pitcher whose stuff had never been the question, whose health and situation had always been the complicating factors, was now a Dodger. The contract extension that followed the trade was 3 years. The total value placed him firmly in the upper tier of pitching contracts in this sport. And the fact that the Dodgers locked him in on an extension immediately, rather than acquiring him and evaluating through the end of the season, said everything about how certain the front office was in its assessment. You don't give 3 years and that kind of money to a question mark. You give it to an answer. The second move landed within hours of the first. And this one carried the number that made the baseball world stop mid-conversation. The combined total of both acquisitions, the trade value assigned to what Los Angeles sent to Boston, plus the full contract value of the extension, plus the separate signing that completed the $250 million figure, arrived as a single announced sum that the Dodgers PR team released without commentary or context. They didn't need to provide context. The number provided its own. $250 million is not a casual commitment. It is not the kind of investment a franchise makes when it is trying to stay competitive. It is the kind of investment a franchise makes when it has decided, definitively, without reservation, that this is the year. This is the window. This is the moment that the work of the last 3 seasons has been pointing toward, and the time for patience is over. The GM, when he finally addressed the media late in the evening, spoke in the measured tone he always uses when he is most certain of something. We identified what we needed. We moved when the opportunity was right. And we made sure that what we committed to, financially, structurally, in terms of the years involved, reflected how seriously we take this moment. A reporter asked him to put a finer point on it. Was this about the playoffs? Was this about October? The GM looked at the reporter for a moment. Everything we do is about October. Everything we have done since day one of this rebuild has been about October. These moves are consistent with that. They are not a departure from our approach. They are the expression of it. Rushing's name appeared in the same news cycle. And this time, unlike previous appearances in the Dodgers' headline rotation, Rushing's situation carried a tone that was harder to read. Not quite a denouement. Not quite a resolution. Something in between, the kind of chapter in a story where you're not sure yet whether you're reading a turning point or a conclusion. Sources described his reaction to the Twin announcements with a word that no one had previously associated with him. Shock. Not anger. Not defiance. Shock. Because somewhere in the calculation of these two enormous acquisitions, in the financial commitment, in the roster implications, in the clear signal of a front office operating at full capacity toward a specific destination, Rushing had apparently seen something that clarified his own situation in a way that previous conversations had not. The Dodgers were not rebuilding around what they had. They were building towards something specific. And the question of whether he was part of that specific thing had just been answered not with words but with numbers. $250 million worth of answers. He had no statement. His representative confirmed only that he was aware of the moves and processing the implications. In the language of professional sports communications, that phrase carries its own particular meaning. It means the conversation is not over. It means decisions are still being made. It means something is coming that hasn't arrived yet. Roberts addressed the media separately from the GM. Deliberately so, a choice that itself communicated something about how the organization wanted these moves understood. Not as a front office imposition on a baseball operation, but as a collaboration. A shared vision executing on a shared plan. He entered the room with the look he gets when he has already won an argument with himself. When the uncertainty is behind him and what remains is simply the work of explaining to others what he already knows. He spoke first about Tucker. What I'll say about Tucker is this: we are taking care of him. That is the priority. Everything else is secondary to making sure he is healthy and that we don't put him in a position where we make things worse in the short term trying to win in the long term. The room understood the weight of that. Tucker's emergency, whatever its exact nature, whatever the full story was beneath the careful language, had created a hole. Not just a roster hole. A presence hole. The kind of absence that changes the feel of a dugout and the confidence of a lineup in ways that statistics can gesture toward but never fully capture. The acquisitions announced tonight were, in part, the front office's answer to that hole. But only in part. Because the other part, the larger part, if Roberts' framing was to be taken seriously, was about something the Dodgers had been building toward since before Tucker's situation became urgent. Since before Rushing's story became complicated. Since before the specific shape of this particular season had fully revealed itself. The part that was always about October. Inside the clubhouse, the reaction was quieter than the outside world might have expected. Players who have been part of winning organizations before, who have lived through the particular experience of a front office making a massive mid-season commitment, described the feeling with surprising consistency. It is not euphoria. It is not celebration. It is something closer to confirmation. A feeling that the people making decisions above you see the same thing you see. Believe in the same possibility you believe in. And are willing to put the kind of money and commitment behind that belief that makes it real rather than theoretical. Several players spoke off the record. The general texture of what they said was consistent. This changes things. Not because of the names. Because of what the names mean. Because of what it says about where we are and where they think we're going. One veteran, who has been through enough trade deadlines and front office announcements to be genuinely difficult. When the organization writes checks like that, you play differently. Not harder, you're already playing as hard as you can. Differently. With a different kind of belief in the destination. Shohei Ohtani had been on the field when the announcements broke. He was one of the last people in the building to see the numbers. When he did, He read them the way he reads most things, carefully, completely, without visible reaction. He asked one question to a staff member standing nearby. The question was about the pitcher's repertoire. Specifically about his secondary pitches and how they played against left-handed hitters. Not about the money. Not about the story. Not about what it meant for the clubhouse narrative or the trade deadline implications or anything else that the outside world was already consuming at enormous speed. About the repertoire. About left-handed hitters. About winning baseball games. The staff member answered his question. Ohtani nodded once. And went back to what he had been doing. That image, quiet, focused, indifferent to the spectacle of $250 million being announced around him, already thinking about the next game, may be the truest summary of what the Dodgers are actually building. Not a collection of headlines. Not a roster assembled for attention. A team built around the specific gravity of one man who simply refuses to be distracted from the only thing that matters. Winning. The GM spent $250 million in one night to give that man what he needs to do exactly that. October is coming. And in Los Angeles tonight, the feeling in the building is that for the first time this season, the Dodgers are exactly where they